Welcome to the Bitcoin Business Podcast put on by Sovereign. I'm your host, Brandon Karpelis, and today I have with me a guest who I have done a lot of commerce with and have been mispronouncing his name until he started his own podcast and started pronouncing it on there. So, without further ado, welcome Rev Hodl to the podcast, who I've been calling Rev Hodl for like 4 or 5 years. So, uh, Rev supplies my family with his lamb every year. We bought maple syrup from you. I think we got a candle. I think we've got a few other things as well. And so this is something that I wanted to tap in our conversation, the circular economy. I know you talk about this stuff all the time. You're part of the Mesh Citadel network and all these sorts of other things. But before we dive into all the good stuff, the substance, why don't you let people know just a little bit about you, your homestead, and anything else you want to tell people about how you kind of arrived at the situation you're in, which I would consider you probably the closest to fully sovereign of an individual I know. So why don't you talk a little bit about where you're at and what you're doing?
Well, hey, Brandon, it's good to be on the podcast. Yeah, as far as hodl hodl, whatever, tomato tomato, but that's just uh, you know, how I say it, hodl. I say noster too, right? I don't know. Um, but I've been homesteading. I started off homesteading before I got into Bitcoin, and I really the reason why I wanted to do homesteading is because for one, I felt like there was a lot of uncertainty in the world, and I wanted to, insulate myself against that uncertainty. And so I got this just 20-acre homestead in Southwest Michigan to start producing some of my own food, and I quickly realized that I could far exceed the quality of the food that I had access to by growing it myself. And in order to grow all your own food and to be sovereign in your food, you got to kind of grow more than what you need. You can't say I need exactly X amount of pounds of meat per year. I've been homesteading for about 11 years, and the reason why I got started homesteading is to create some sovereignty in my food production, my power production, my water production, or my water access to water. I just wanted to be able to know that I was going to be all right if things in the world kept going in the direction which I saw them going in, which was more and more uncertainty. And the biggest missing piece to all this was the money. I practice a design framework called permaculture, and one of the ethics of the three ethics of permaculture is non-extraction. And in order to participate in the fiat system, you essentially have to practice extraction. So what a lot of these permaculture folks are doing is they're trying to figure out a way to build all this resilience and self-sovereignty and regenerative systems, all these regenerative systems without using money, like trying to avoid the dollar as much as possible. And I quickly found that Bitcoin was a money that is not extractive. It's actually generative, and it aligns a lot with nature. And so it was a perfect fit to integrate into my homestead. And so I've been using Bitcoin here, integrating in every way I can for the last 5 or 6 years or so. I guess 2020 was when I really kind of found out about Bitcoin. It took me a little while to really get the ball rolling on it, but it's been about that long since I've been playing with it.
How long have you been homesteading for?
So 11 years. Well, this will be our 11th spring coming up here.
Awesome. And what were you doing before that? Were you, many of us that have exited sort of the fiat world, it's similar when you leave the fiat world to go do something in Bitcoin, whatever that may be. It's there's a lot of parallels to walking out of sort of the, urban or suburban life to a where you rely on the grocery store and restaurants and have the connections with your neighbors are social and that's about it, as opposed to stepping into a world where you're providing for yourself, you're providing for your family, your relationships are also social but also economical and also symbiotic as well, where you're providing value to someone and they're providing back more than just companionship and friendship. Not that there's anything wrong with those are of course important things to have in life, But what was your sort of transition? What were you doing before?
So it's pretty funny. I think my story, even though I wasn't leaving my industry because of Bitcoin, it probably it received probably a similar reaction. So I was working in LA. I was working on in post production on reality and documentary style TV, and so I kind of was getting, I was doing when I was living in LA, I was kind of already doing a lot of the stuff as much as I could to with the apartment that I lived in and the space that I had to produce what I could. I was making my own toothpaste, making my own deodorant. I didn't get quite as far as making my own soap, but I was home brewing beer. I was growing cannabis. I was growing microgreens, doing sprouting, trying to get a little garden going in the backyard and everything. I actually had a hydroponic window farm in my bedroom where I was growing tomatoes and everything. And
Be fair, that was just so you could pay rent living in LA. So
yeah, I mean, it was just, what could I do,
I'm
right?
joking. Yeah,
And
yeah,
and really, no, seriously though, I did live with I had a 4 bedroom apartment and I lived with 5 people, and sometimes there'd be another six dude that would hang out.
and there.
And so we had like curtains, actually just bed sheets kind of hanging up, sectioning off one corner of our living room, and that was somebody's bedroom. And this is how we acquired or accomplished this cheap rent, a decent cost of living. But it quickly became clear, like I am never gonna amount to anything continuing on in this place, and it would seem like one of the most dangerous places to be if you think that there's any risk of natural disaster or social unrest or whatever. I just saw that the culture in LA was not a culture that when the shit hits the fan, everyone's going to quickly come together and figure it out. And so, needless to say, I suddenly basically quit my job. I was like, dude, I think I'm just going to go be a farmer. And everyone's like, what the hell? And they kind of laughed me out of the room, essentially. Now, several years later, when COVID comes around, those people are kind of like, "Hey, maybe you had a decent idea there."
We come to your
And
farm.
today, well, none of them have ever visited because they're so far away. But
Yeah.
so yeah, I
So
left
anyway, sorry.
LA to start doing this homesteading thing. And you were kind of talking about how the relationships with your neighbors and everything are different. And it when you get into a rural area and you start to really isolate yourself a little bit more from, you just don't have as many people close by. The relationships that you do build are important. You need to have a good relationship with your neighbor, because when you get your tractor stuck and there's no one else to come give you a hand, the neighbor can do what they can, and it's the difference between being stuck for who knows how long to being back up and running later that afternoon. It was very revealing, like how you could kind of get by without this social capital, this cultural capital, when you live in a densely populated area. But when you're kind of really on your own, the value of that social capital and that cultural capital becomes much higher on your stack, right? You want to have a good balance. You want to have access to that. You want to have access to social capital, cultural capital, the ability to call upon somebody for help. Um, you can, it's you Even if you could buy your way out of certain situations, it's not like the solution is there to be bought.
Well,
So a lot
yeah.
of times the money won't help you.
No, I mean, well, and what you're talking about, it's interesting. You're talking about social capital and this sort of stuff, but another valuable part of that social capital is how long term is it? Like to your point, in COVID, all the social capital got liquidated overnight. It was like FTX collapsed and you were holding a bag of shit coins. If you lived in a city, and any social capital you had was just basically erased overnight. Some people had some family members or some close friends that stuck it out. And I thank God every day that I actually, in terms of people close to me, did incredibly well in terms of family and friends, in terms of people that were very understanding and of my choices, and even if maybe they didn't agree with me, they I wasn't shunned or rejected in any way for 90% of those friends. But you could have been someone else, or even just getting around the city. I mean, I remember going into a Whole Foods without a mask on, and every single person was staring at me. I had two people come up, say they were going to call the police on me, and I just walked out. And it's like, I basically had an entire community. I didn't know these people personally, but I lived in the community. I lived in the neighborhood. I walked to the store, and I had to walk out with nothing, because overnight that was gone. And it didn't matter how much money I had. I could have put, I could have put 1 Bitcoin on a Sats card and tried to give it to someone, and I still would have been kicked out of the store. So, like, it didn't do me any good. But what I did have was relationships with a farmer, relationships, with other people, and things like that helped supplement it. And yes, eventually at some point you do have to go get some food and do some things you don't want to do, or maybe you go somewhere else that's a little more tolerant or whatever, and it's a huge headache. But if you had that social capital, if you had those relationships in place, life just goes on like it never changed. You don't have these massive disruptions in your life. And something you were talking about on your last podcast you did with Reed, and was about, um it takes time to build these networks. It's low time preference. Like, you're not going to show up to your first meetup and then all of a sudden you're going to be plugged in, and you're going to have a guy help you run a node, and you're going to have someone to buy your beef from, and you're going to have someone to buy your eggs from. Like, that's not going to happen. That happens over like 3 4 5 years, continually showing up, continuing to foster these relationships and building that capital over time. And I thought that was a really interesting way of framing it, and such a salient point about how to go about doing this, and the importance of starting. We talk in Bitcoin, get off zero. Well, do the same in terms of your social capital.
Yeah, and so I do. So Reed and I have a podcast. It's called Local Bitcoiners, and that podcast is basically a podcast about Bitcoin meetups. And the reason why I thought it was important to start a podcast about Bitcoin meetups is because I found them to be so incredibly valuable to me, as far as the utility that I can get out of my Bitcoin and how I interact with Bitcoin. And so I started off going to meetups. I actually heard for the first time on Rabbit Hole Recap, there was a shout out um, back in like 2021 or something, that there was a meetup just down the road from me in Benton Harbor, Michigan. And I was like, oh, wow. I never heard of this idea of a Bitcoin meetup before, and I was like, well, I wonder if this is just like scammers waiting in the shadows. Look, when I show up, they're gonna jump out at me and steal my phone or something. I was very skeptical of it at first, but as soon as I showed up, it was like, oh my God, this is how this is it. This is how Bitcoin should be, because you're talking with people, you're able to just get real, true information. Um, and but at that time, it was just about that. It was just about hanging out, exchanging information about Bitcoin, talking about Bitcoin, and sort of building, like we're talking about, social capital, building relationships. Now, being the homesteader, I was producing maple syrup at the time, and I thought, well, at the next meetup, I'm going to bring some of my extra maple syrup and see if anyone wants to buy it for Bitcoin. And because also listening to Rabbit Hole Recap, I heard that Matt Odell say over and over again, well, the best way to get no KYC Bitcoin is to earn it. And I'm like, well, how do you earn Bitcoin? Well, you just have a product and go somewhere where the Bitcoiners are, which happens to be a Bitcoin meetup. So I showed up with this maple syrup, and it was met with, everyone was excited to be able to spend their Bitcoin and on something sweet and a little treat. It was a perfect first product to introduce this idea into the meetup culture there. And that meetup in Southwest Michigan has now blossomed into a place where I can get. It's essentially like a grocery trip, man. One guy's producing pork, so I can go get bacon, ground pork, pork chops. Another guy has access to grass-fed, grass-finished ground beef, so you can get ground beef there. Another guy's roasting coffee, and he roasts the coffee with solar power, and so you can go get coffee there. And the list goes on to the point where there there is literally a circular economy going on at this meetup, because I'll sell somebody maple syrup, and I'll take the sats that I got from them, turn around and spend those sats with another person and buy yogurt. And everyone leaves with a pile of stuff at the end of the meetup. And so, like you said, this didn't exactly happen overnight. This is the level that it's at now took years to develop, and it took one person to show up with one thing to seed the idea to everyone else, like, hey, maybe there's something that I could bring to contribute. And it's not like all these people are producing these goods themselves. Uh, like I said, one guy, he goes to a creamery, picks up yogurt, and then he just basically turns his dollars into yogurt, and then turns the yogurt into Bitcoin, because the yogurt is something that we don't have access to, that we want access to. And the same thing is true with the beef. The guy goes and buys the beef, turns the dollars into beef, brings it to the meetup, turns the beef into Bitcoin, and we all get the high quality beef that we're after without having to go to the farm. And so it's by providing market access, you can actually get KYC free Bitcoin if this concept of the circular economy exists in your local meetup culture.
Well, I mean, listen, that's a huge part of how our normal economy works, anyways. That you have distributors, you have wholesalers, you have retailers, you have this whole market dynamic, and it's there's always, oh well, it's the middleman, he's just wetting his beak. But it's like, well, yes, there is a middleman, but you couldn't get it without the middleman. You need the middleman, you need the logistics company, you need the network that's in there. And it's no different with when it comes to buying stuff in Bitcoin. It's, if you want to pay for stuff in Bitcoin, you have to have a network of people that are going to bring you things that you're able to buy in Bitcoin. And hopefully one day that's everything. We're just on a Bitcoin standard, but right now we're certainly not. And not only that, we're in a situation where what you were talking about, wanting to realizing the world was chaotic and wild. I mean, I feel like the chaos and insanity is 10x since then. It's like an order of magnitude higher. And we're staring at a situation where we don't know what's going to happen. We have absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And so, I mean, that's just uncertainty. And so, in times of uncertainty, you want to have ways to reduce your exposure to catastrophic outcomes, right? And I'm not saying everyone should, go mount a 50 caliber on the roof of their house and have 20,000 rounds of ammunition and store as many canned goods, whatever. But there's just practical ways to have food security, water security, just some basic things that one, you're going to get a much better product. The beef I get from Bitcoiners, the lamb I get from you, the eggs we get from a farmer. It's the pork. It's all just, it's so much better. It's such higher quality, and it's like, I know I can always go to them. I know you've been going back and forth on whether you're going to keep doing lamb, but as long as you keep doing lamb, like, I know I have a line to you where I can reach out and be like, hey, I'm in for my lamb this year. And same with the guy raising beef, that I know I can reach out to him. He takes Bitcoin and just say, hey, I'm in for my cow this year. And like, those were those are pretty simple things, but I feel secure in them. And I didn't have to do anything crazy. Like, I went to beefinitiative.com, found my local rancher. Now I know him. I'm on a first name basis with him. We talk. I know you. I know other Bitcoiners that I buy stuff from. And it does take time and it does take a little effort, but it's like, you don't have to go full doomsday prepper to just build some resiliency into your life.
Well, yeah, and when you know Bitcoiners that you can do business with and they're local to you, this gives you more liquidity, more like real useful liquidity for your Bitcoin in those times of drastic uncertainty. When it, like, let's not say it's Mad Max, but if there's like these supply chain shortages and things like that that come up, um, you don't have to go through the process of like finding a way to liquidate your Bitcoin for dollars, then spending the dollars and going and getting access to these products. You can just directly spend your Bitcoin with the producer, and they're likely gonna, like our relationship, right? I'm saying I don't really want to deal with selling whole lambs to people anymore. It's too much of a pain in my butt, right? It's a pain in the ass to coordinate the cuts and the deliveries and do the meeting and all this stuff. And so it's like, but For you, because you've been buying lamb for me for several years, it's like, well, I know that we're good, right? Maybe I can sell you a lamb, I can continue that, but I'm not looking to expand that relationship with more people, right? And so this gives you like the point is you get a lot of like actual useful liquidity for your Bitcoin by spending it and developing relationships with producers that want Bitcoin. And this brings up another kind of thing I've been thinking about lately. I really don't believe in the participation of the KYC system as far as Bitcoin goes, but you can't blame people for taking that convenience. It's so much more difficult to go no KYC only and jump through all the hoops in order to make that a reality for yourself. So people are going to KYC and they're going to, get the Bitcoin that way. And so there's these a lot of times people are also worried about the tax implications of spending their Bitcoin, and so they're hesitant to spend their Bitcoin because of the tax implications. But the cool thing is that now you've got Strike, who basically lets you take the dollars and make a dollar payment essentially, which ends up as a Bitcoin payment in somebody else's wallet. I don't necessarily know the whole point of that, right? Is to basically say there's no gain or loss here. It's an instant transfer from dollars to Bitcoin. There's no capital gain or loss. And I would assume that you could do a similar thing with Cash App. At least if someone, the IRS was like, what's going on with all these Bitcoin payments? You'd be like, look, I bought Bitcoin and I instantly sold it to buy this good or service. I'm not paying you capital gains. Fuck you. And the whole point is that when people take that step, if they're already okay with the risks of KYC and participating in the KYC system, when you buy that, when you take your dollars and you buy Bitcoin and then you send Bitcoin directly to the producer at these meetups or wherever on Nostr, wherever it might be, you're actually injecting more Bitcoin into the true peer-to-peer economy. You're like freeing it from the KYC system, and especially if you're doing it over Lightning, right? Because now there's no actual on-chain linkage to that activity anymore.
Yeah, I listen, there's all sorts of privacy options out there for people that have bought KYC Bitcoin. Listen, are you going to be able to hide your two Bitcoin from Mossad? Probably not, but it's pretty good to get you some privacy, to open a Lightning channel where you can at least transact on that channel privately. And there's all sorts of other options. And to your point, Rev, that if you're taking some of that KYC Bitcoin or even cash and then paying over the Lightning Network, which is a lot of what, like you said, Cash App, Square, Block, and Strike are enabling, then exactly, now you've introduced some KYC platform and you've basically un-KYC'd the Bitcoin. And so you've put that into the economy. And I mean, you're exactly right. Like the friction points of getting Bitcoin non KYC, especially if you want to buy a material amount. I mean, there's basically no way to get over $10,000 of Bitcoin non KYC. I mean, you really have to know somebody. You got to have some connections, and or you just got to kind of get lucky on one of these peer-to-peer platforms that someone is out there looking to sell a lot of Bitcoin. It's really really difficult, and if you're going to go buy something like that, people charge a premium. If for non KYC Bitcoin, it's going to cost you a couple percentage points, and if you're buying large amounts, that starts to add up. And it's like, hey, I'm buying a larger amount. It should be going the other way, which the KYC platforms do have. Your cost actually comes down as you buy more, and so yeah, it's really really it's you have to be really, really principled and value your privacy and the non KY. You have to put such a premium on that to justify doing that. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but it's individuals. Listen, I'm just rational. People are going to make economic choices to do what they want, and they're probably not going to mix their coins afterwards either, because that's a cost, that's time, that's effort, and depending on how expensive the mempool is, you may be paying or a decent amount of money to get some privacy. And so all they're all just friction points, and it's all trade-offs. And so yeah, every time you can introduce some of those coins back into this economy where people are transacting with each other, and hopefully are not going back to exchanges to, KYC exchanges to sell it, which is also part of knowing your network and knowing who you're dealing with, and um, which I really appreciate what Square's doing with this, with the rollout of the at every terminal. And I'm obviously going to be taking advantage of it. There's no doubt I'm paying with Bitcoin at every single Square terminal that exists. But at the end of the day, the merchant's converting it back to dollars, and that has to go through an exchange, and they're connected with Square and it's KYC. But so I get that that's going to happen. But yeah, to participate in this network, it it provides value to everyone in the network along with the Bitcoin ecosystem as well. And something I wanted to get back to and tie it into something else you're heavily involved with is this idea you're talking about supply chain disruptions and this sort of thing, and you were talking about just being able to use your Bitcoin and spend and having that security. But how about the security of knowing that my beef's not coming from New Zealand? And if they close the Strait of Hormuz, I still have access to my beef, or that um, my eggs are coming from a farm in Indiana, and I don't have to worry about some Chinese bird flu, and then those eggs getting shipped over here and selling them to me at Target to have to deal with any of that stuff. And so along those lines, it's not only just a monetary economic network, but it's also a physical logistical network as well, which is something I talked a lot about Augie with when I had him on this pod. And you're deeply involved in the Mesh Citadel network. So why don't you tell everyone listening a little bit about the Mesh Citadel network, what you guys are trying to do there, and just expand. Augie and I kind of just touched the surface. I also talked with Eric FJ, who runs Conduit Market on Noster as well, about this sort of problem of solving the physical infrastructure, the real world logistics of doing this, and what you guys are working on there.
Yeah, so the Mesh Citadel is it's basically a way of saying, look, this idea, this pie in the sky dream of Bitcoiners being able to just buy an island and build a citadel and fortify against all attack, all this kinetic physical attack is unrealistic. But the idea that the Bitcoiners can isolate themselves from the rest of the extractive system, the fiat society, it's still possible. And one way to accomplish this would be, instead of having this island that you're trying to defend, you have more of a second layer of this mesh of different local economies cooperating together and linking together in small, hard to detect ways. And so that's the mesh citadel. It's a mesh network citadel. It's sovereignty in a mesh format. And so the what's going on, at least what I'm kind of doing, it right now, because there's not a lot of people who are even set up to participate in this. There's more and more every day, but there's not a lot of us out there who are really set up to truly take advantage of this idea. So I end up going to a lot of meetups. I go to a meetup at least once a week, and sometimes more than one a week. And what I do is I try and bring my produce, whatever I'm producing, and that could even be like Bitcoin. I sell Bitcoin mining space heaters, anything I can come up to sell for Bitcoin that a Bitcoin meetup community or culture would want. I try and bring it there. But while I'm there, I also try and stoke this idea of like, all right, come on, bring your stuff. And in this last year, I even started to try and buy some things from somebody, candles, for example. I bought some candles wholesale, and then I tried to bring those to the meetups and sell them, and just start to make these connections between the meetups. Now, the biggest dream would be to actually have some sort of organized, what's that? Like back in the covered wagon days, right? Everyone in the town would buy, they'd put in their order. That order would go off in the
Co-op,
mail, and then one day the covered wagon would come with everyone's shit, like months later, right? And everyone's really excited. Um,
a co-op.
and so, or the train car, like
That's,
what? It's just like you can't. We're we're rebuilding old things. We're taking old things and like reinterpreting them through a Bitcoin context, because this is how you keep it underground, keep it off the radar. And so we're trying to get this idea of like, all right, so this meetup has there's Rev over here with maple syrup, and then there's Otis Bittmeyer over there with coffee, and these guys are in Michigan, so we're gonna take orders from the Michigan area for Cleveland, and then on through to Pennsylvania or whatever. And so we will put together those products, fill those orders. Someone will come to one meeting point, maybe it's a Southwest Michigan meetup, pick up all the orders, go to Cleveland, drop off the orders, pick up more stuff from Cleveland that people want in Pennsylvania, and then carry the orders from Michigan and Cleveland on to Pennsylvania. Then when they get to Pennsylvania, they pick up the stuff, maybe there's beef in Pennsylvania, and they bring it back to Cleveland and on through to Michigan. And so now there's somebody that's kind of connecting these different smaller circular economies and providing the market access to make up the difference. So now not every circular economy has to necessarily produce everything, but they can specialize in what they're good at and then create liquidity across them.
Nice. I think about this way too much. I think about there's it's a kind of a I don't want to say famous, but sort of well known map that goes around the Bitcoin circles, and it's of Europe back in 1300 or whatever, and it's just thousands upon thousands of little kingdoms out there. And of course, what centralized everything? Well, it was easier to defend with a collective, uh, basically central point of power, right? That you could defend, and you could amass more strength that way, and sort of the resource extraction through violence game became a lot easier when you were centralized. And then it behooved you as a one of these maybe small fiefdom or kingdom leaders or rulers or lords or whatever. It's like, well, I could get run over by these guys, or I could, the old beat them or join them. And or I could get under their umbrella, and then I stand to gain a bunch of riches because I'm at the top of the pyramid here. And it was just this forever centralizing force, and it was really along the lines of the ability to project power. And we're starting to get into a world. It's I don't know if you've read The Sovereign Individual or not, but classic Bitcoiner book, but that was written in 97, and they were talking about how the ability to project power is going to start to actually decentralize. And we're watching that in real time, right? We're watching drone warfare all over the world. The US is moving in with these giant aircraft carriers, and it's like $60,000 of technology could take these two things out in 30 seconds. And so we're kind of moving away from this benefit of resource extraction through the projection of force and everything. And along with that, I imagine we're going to start to, just as we're seeing the decentralization of money with Bitcoin. I mean, you're talking about the world reserve currency. That every currency in the world is pegged to the US dollar. And yeah, sure, all these nations can have their own currency, but it's still pegged to the dollar at the end of the day. And there's one freaking node. It's the Federal Reserve. There is one node that runs the entire monetary system for the entire world, which is mind blowing to think about. So, as we start to decentralize that into tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, whatever, how many nodes, the same thing is going to start to happen with our food production, with our communications layers, with all this other stuff. And I mean, obviously, the internet's already done this to a large extent with our communications, and you know now it's being trying to be re-centralized via platforms where people are trying to centralize the decentralized control. And obviously the same thing's going on with Bitcoin, with Wall Street and paper Bitcoin, and these giant corporations trying to put it on their balance sheet and then sell you shares in their company because buying your own Bitcoin would be impossible. So it's there's like these currents fighting each other, that we kind of reached peak centralization. We're starting to decentralize, and in between this, there's these forces that are trying to keep the centralization in place and bring it back. And people have all sorts of different insights as to what's going on, and the institutions are falling apart and all this stuff. But I really think at the end of the day, it's just we're trying to, humanity wants to decentralize again. We're trying to get out of this web of centralization. We just want to be left alone. We want to be put back to our own wares, and along with that, it's going to be our responsibility to start building the networks, the commerce, and everything else to facilitate this decentralizing of society.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the extractive forces are starting to finally see the diminishing returns. And one of the things that the centralization, it's actually beautiful that the whole world was able to be connected via this centralization through the internet. Because now that we have the internet, like people say, oh, when you get this idea that, oh, if the system fails, it's like a nuclear bomb blows up and blows everything up. It's like, no, the system goes away, but all the shit is still there. The roads are still there. The buildings are still there. The people are still there. They're still going to be doing shit. And so the fact is that we've got the centralization allowed for the internet to become possible. We literally connected the world together with a bunch of wires and now satellites and shit. And when so now that the extraction is becoming diminishing returns, it's starting to essentially consume itself. And you could see this in the example of these monocrop soy and corn farm styles, right? More inputs, more input, more inputs, more spray, more spray, more spray. The yields are not growing anymore by any means, and the weeds are coming in and shit. And so it's just like, yo, this ain't gonna work. The fact that these farmers are trying to hold the cornfield as a cornfield in perpetuity is a bad strategy. It's a losing strategy. You have to decide. In permaculture, we talk about this in terms of succession in a system. Natural systems, they don't stay static. They evolve from one step to the next, and they cyclically return back to the beginning again through disaster and boom and bust and so on and so forth. And so when we have the beautiful thing about when we're building these small, I like to call it like hyper Bitcoinize your own life, like just work really hard to build the relationships to make it so that you live on a Bitcoin standard and all you get as much utilization out of your Bitcoin as you can. And when enough people start doing this in a small local area, now you've got this concentration of Bitcoin activity, right? And we don't necessarily have to defend. Like now we've got a town. Let's imagine it's a town, right? We've got enough stuff to like supply our food and like fix our cars, and we've got the goods and services that we need. And we're still like a soft fork of the fiat system of the larger centralized system, because all of the most people are still living in that world. We're just living in a smaller version of that world amongst ourselves. And so we naturally get the protection in many ways that exists there in order for us to grow small and slow. And this is another permaculture principle: small and slow solutions. So it doesn't require us, in order for Bitcoin to become the world reserve currency, to all of a sudden have this hyper Bitcoinization event. Um, like I said, you can live in a Bitcoinized world for yourself in a small community and gain all the protection of the centralized systems. And so as the centralized system fails and your system grows in power, now it just sort of transitions out. You're kind of left as the dust settles. These small Bitcoin communities, I imagine, will be in a much better position to handle whatever comes up next than the people who are still trying to trade their way into not losing all their, not getting their retirements inflated away, right?
Yeah, I always think about this too, and are we just going to live through a period where we have this decentralization where things go back to how they were, like in the 1300s, Europe type situation, and then is it all just going to centralize back? Like, will we have done all this for or not? I'm a big believer in the Pareto principle. And I think just because Bitcoin is distributed, I think at the beginning it will start out that the money will be decentralized and Bitcoiners will have an outsized level of influence in the world and capital deployment and that sort of thing. But as time goes on, it's going to centralize to those that are better, that are providing the most value. And then it's going to be incumbent upon those people to sort of be benevolent or have the Bitcoin spirit or ethos. Not that every Bitcoiner has the Bitcoin ethos necessarily, but how long are those principles going to hold before kind of the wealth just re-centralizes and then the people who amass the wealth use that to centralize things for themselves? And maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe maybe we really do fully decentralize and it stays that way. But I think I'm kind of like the Bugle Boys talk about. We're in the first turning. Are we going to wake up 200 years from now and it's going to be, the boomers are back in charge and they're at the casino gambling their social security fund, their social security Bitcoin that some guy doled out to a bunch of people because it got him a bunch of votes, and we're just right back to square one, just with a different money.
Yeah, with the different. So I think the biggest thing that is going to really affect the way this all plays out, in my opinion, the thing that's different about Bitcoin than gold or any other money is that, like let's say the king, you got this kingdom, right, or whatever, and they got a bunch of shit that people want there, jewels, riches, fine art, whatever, valuable stuff. Well, when it comes to Bitcoin, like you go there and just say, fuck you. The king says, no, I'm not giving you anything. I'll go down. I'll fight to the last breath. And so they just stab the motherfucker and take all his shit, right? You just kill the dude and then you can still just go get it, right? You could get your metal detector, go find out where the gold's buried, whatever. It's there to go get. When you kill the dude and he's got the Bitcoin keys and he didn't give it up, guess what? You got no fucking Bitcoin. And so this is the difference in the incentive where if you go in there trying to like steal, like to forcibly take the Bitcoin from somebody, especially as time goes on, like right now, it's pretty iffy about these multi-sig setups and um, how truly resistant they are to just basically having somebody sitting there cutting off your finger and you're saying, dude, I can't, like eventually you're gonna be like, all right, I know where the descriptor is and I know where this key is and you can call my brother and he's got the key and just don't eventually they get the information they want to get the Bitcoin. But I think as time goes on, it's going to be even more and more difficult and Bitcoin's going to find ways or Bitcoiners will find ways that basically when you try and take it, I just really can't give you it. I can give you like what I got in my wallet, in my back pocket, but you ain't getting my life savings, dude. No one's getting it. You know what I mean? And so this creates a society where the incentives are much different, where instead of these people that have managed to succeed through producing value for society to accumulate a lot of Bitcoin, uh, everybody's incentive is instead of trying to kill them to take it from them, they're going to try and provide value to them to earn it from them. In my opinion, I think this is where it's going to head. And so this creates a inherently just much more productive society overall without the need for so much centralization as well, because the defense isn't necessary either. Everyone is able to defend their wealth uh, effectively themselves, their life savings, right? The big portion of it, just through the technological mechanisms of Bitcoin.
Well, I was thinking more in terms of the people who did earn it. They sort of assume power. They get into power, and they don't need the money. They're not coming after you for your money. They're coming after you for your land, and or they're saying, I want half your harvest, like the kings used to do back in the day, where they would say, that forest is mine. I get to go hunting there, and if you want to come hunting there, I get half your kill. Or oh, nice cornfield you have over there. Half of that's mine, and that's where the force projection comes in. Is these people who have amassed incredible wealth um, are fine on the wealth side. They're not necessarily trying to accumulate more money. They're trying to accumulate more things, and that's where I could see things sort of returning back to where we are. I also do agree with you. I also agree that um, that you could be in a situation where, because the money is so scarce like Bitcoin, that it takes such a small amount of money to purchase things, that people can protect enormous amounts of wealth and just move out of one jurisdiction and go to the next one and say, well, I'm going to go buy farmland over there because I have 100,000 sats and I can buy like 50 acres with that, or whatever it is, like at that point in time. So I do think there are all sorts of dynamics that, as you have a deflationary currency and everything gets cheaper around it, that also changes the calculus too, and your ability to move around and change jurisdictions and who's ruling over you. I think that all factors into. But it's anyways, it's just an interesting thought experiment. I think a lot about it,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day,
I
I
mean,
don't
one
have
more
the
point to
answers.
that,
Yeah,
to like the feudal lord, the dude who's met, like, let's say Michael Saylor, he's like, I'm gonna take over the world. And like, but Michael Saylor's the only one who can spend the Bitcoin. Well, all you got to do is kill Michael Saylor, and then the world gets the Bitcoin. There's no like game of hop. Like when you kill that feudal lord and the keys get lost, right? The ability to spend the Bitcoin, you
yours
basically just
becomes worth
gave the
more. Yeah,
Bitcoin to everybody.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
there's a huge incentive for, I mean, if someone's a bad actor and they're not playing nice, and everyone's like, dude, you keep taking advantage of me, you keep taking advantage of my community. The mob with the pitchforks can come out, and instead of like once that dude's dead, then everyone kind of scrambles to get these riches for themselves and redistribute them, however, or somebody else can just go subsume the kingdom, and then now he's the feudal lord with all the power. It's like, dude, that power just immediately that financial capital, just the purchasing power, just got distributed amongst everybody. And so there, this, I guess it works both ways in that sense.
Well, then you could have a situation. Well, I mean, I would presume that if you're in charge, if you're like a monarch or a lord or whatever, that you're going to have some sort of succession plan, some sort of, hey, if I die, here's access to the keys. Then you can get it. Then you get into like a whole Game of Thrones situation over like, oh, you have one key, this person has one key. I'm a lot. I mean, you could get into all sorts. I mean, you could write like a someone should do that actually. Not me because I'm not a good writer, but someone who's a little more creative and a good writer. That would be a cool book idea, like a futuristic feudal system where keys are distributed amongst like a kingdom and all of the sort of like dramatic strategy and backstabbing and stuff that could come with that.
But for now, I mean, the biggest incentive for everyone who's looking to earn Bitcoin is you basically got to produce the most value. You have to produce so much
Yes.
value that somebody's willing to spend the Bitcoin with you, or they're willing to take the risk of filtering fiat money through the Bitcoin system and sending you Bitcoin instead of just trying to pay you in dollars. And actually, this might offend some people, but like really, I when I go to a Bitcoin meetup and someone tries to pay me in fiat, I think about it as like them trying to like give me their problem because I don't use KYC Bitcoin. So like when I get dollars, it's actually really hard for me to take those dollars and go turn that into Bitcoin somewhere else. And so it's like here's that $20. It's like what the hell am I going to do with this $20 now? How do I turn this into Bitcoin? And so it's these these bridges from fiat to Bitcoin, I think are incredibly important for people like me who are really ideologically positioned to only use Bitcoin as much as like basically use the dollar as little as possible, use the Bitcoin as much as possible. Um, Skip giving me the dollars, just find a way to get the Bitcoin to these people. It's going to be very helpful in bolstering this movement, this economy, this revolution.
I also think it's psychologically insulting to it's different. If listen, if I pay for a dinner on my credit card and people are like, I'm gonna Venmo you, like, what am I gonna do? I paid in fiat, so I can't complain. But like, I didn't even pay in real fiat. I paid in fiat made out of thin air, and so, like, I can't really complain about that. But when someone actually does, like, when I get my beef from my rancher, that guy spent like over a year cultivating this, picking out his herd, making sure they're healthy, keeping his soil fertile, keeping his grass good so the cows are fed well, making sure all his animals are healthy, doing all this stuff. And then he did all this work, all this effort, all this time to deliver this to me. And then I'm gonna go give him a stack of paper or some digital entry in a ledger. Like I find it insulting to the person I'm transacting with if they are a Bitcoiner, if they would rather have Bitcoin, like you said, it's almost like a slap in the face. It's like you've just given me a problem. Or maybe it's not a problem. Maybe the person's like, okay, great, I can, pay my mortgage next month with this payment or half this payment for this cow or whatever. Like I'll just make do. But at the end of the day, I'm giving you fake money for real stuff. And I just on principle, I don't like that.
Yeah, it's if you're at a Bitcoin meetup and people are selling stuff, they probably want Bitcoin, and you should probably pay them in Bitcoin. And if you're on Nostr, right, and you're selling stuff, I don't see anyone really trying to market their things on Nostr for fiat. That's not the point. Everyone wants Bitcoin. This is how you get Bitcoin. Um, and so like Nostr is another Nostr's like the digital Bitcoin meetup, in my opinion. At least what I'd like to see Bitcoin meetups become. It's like this place where no one can really censor or stop our interactions, and we're free to kind of make the deals the way we want them. And there's a lot of different tools, and it's messy and all kind of weird, but ultimately, it's like there's a lot. You have much cleaner opportunity to sell your stuff for Bitcoin on Nostr than I think if you tried to use Twitter or Telegram or anything else, right? The Nostr, that's where the Bitcoiners are.
100%. And I go to people's websites. I mean, I get wine from Peony Lane. I get ghee from Grape Ghee. I get soap from Soap Miner. I get olive oil from Sats Oil. I get the list is endless. It goes on. I'm leaving off like a dozen other merchants that I buy from. But I go to their website, I buy it, whatever. I set up now. I have my Oshi account. I get Bitcoin rewards. I pay over Lightning. Great, that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, I know that if I ever had to, I could reach out to Great Key. I could just hit him up and be like, "Hey man, I'm sending you a zap. You got my address. Ship me some ghee." Like that's another way too, where if somehow the we were unable to access the website, or we have a Cloudflare situation or an AWS situation or whatever, these hosted services, it's like we're still able to communicate, we're still able to transact. And because of Nostr, because of Bitcoin, there's basically no way to shut down the ability for that to take place. And that's really, really cool as well.
Yeah, there's no shadow banning. I know that I'm going to get pure, like the true fidelity of whatever I'm putting out there. Now, I mean, technical issues aside with the relays and all that bullshit, whatever. But I know when I make a note that the people that follow me will likely have access to that information. And like the way I use Nostr to sell my stuff is very much just I make a note, I say here's what I got for sale. DM me if you want it. And then once they DM me, then we move off into Signal, and then we facilitate the payment and do the shipping information in a little bit more private communication. Um, because like the nature of my products, like the cannabis seed, for example, like I'm not necessarily interested in having a website or even putting the effort into making a website because I'm only going to sell this product for a few months while the spring season's on and people are wanting to buy the cannabis seed to plant it. And then I wait until the next season to grow to produce the next round, the next crop of seed. And so I don't necessarily need a place that this product lives at all times for them people to buy. It's like ephemeral, right? So just, hey, it's available now. It's in this note. Come get it. And it's a very easy, convenient way for me to market that product versus putting all the effort into having a website, having to manage like, uh-oh, an order came in. Now I have to process it, and because I'm not a business that like I'm not a packer and shipper moving high volume type of stuff. I just want to build good relationships with the people, sell the extra stuff that I have, and this Nostr opportunity is it's a huge way for me to gain a little bit more market access for products that I can't necessarily liquidate locally so easily. Like I could sell cannabis seed to a handful of people around here, and that's pretty much all the people around here that want my cannabis seed. But there's a lot more people that want the cannabis seed on Nostr.
Absolutely. It's yeah, and I mean the possibilities are just endless, and it is the amount of opportunity out there right now to start building all these things and everything we want. It is I look back at what I was doing before, and just sitting in some corporate job, and it was like, what am I like? I'm doing nothing here. Like I'm basically I'm just stagnating. I'm just sitting here. I don't even know if treading waters. It was just like I'm just a zero. I'm just a neutral. I'm not a plus. I'm not a minus. I'm just a big fat zero. And
Complacent.
it's, yeah, complacent, exactly right. And it's, you know, there's all this opportunity out there to start. It's going to be really, really easy to not be complacent. And it's, I mean, there's no real excuse. Like, I understand kind of the old centralized world. Like, if you wanted to go be an actor or an actress or something, you being in Hollywood, like, you had to know somebody, or you had to compromise on your ethics, or do some things that maybe you didn't want to do, and like, that's how you got there. And and so I get that. It's like, listen, you're either in or you're out. There's gatekeepers, but now you have these tools, you have all this AI, agentic stuff coming out. It's like there are no gates anymore. It's kind of like, what's your excuse here? Why aren't you doing this? And I guess maybe the answer is some people like their complacency. It's like what's his face in the Joe Pantoliano in the Matrix, where he just wants to go back to thinking the steak is real and the chick is hot and the wine is good, but in reality, it's just a miserable, soulless nothing.
And I think there's like a lot of opportunity for people to just get started in a small way with these Bitcoin meetups and with Noster. Like you don't, I think a lot of people think, oh, if I'm gonna like live on Bitcoin and be on a Bitcoin standard and all this stuff, I need to like lose my fiat job and have all this Bitcoin cash flow like and like with the snap of a finger. And it's like not really it's way more important and way more impactful if you just have like a little side hustle where maybe everyone's got an oven, you know what I mean? And it's not too hard to put 2 loaves of sourdough bread in the oven the day of the meetup and then try and sell the loaves of bread for $15 a piece and get $30 a Bitcoin. Um, and you know there's endless ways, especially with this vibe coding stuff now, that you can participate in the Noster world and earn Bitcoin, and just in little steps, little bites, until eventually, like at this point now, I do these short-term rentals at my homestead, and they're the vast majority of that cash flow of my cash flow, and that's fiat, right? But every year that the percentage of that fiat cash flow is shrinking in comparison to the percentage of the direct Bitcoin cash flow that I have. And I'm slowly weaning myself off that fiat cash flow and growing the amount of Bitcoin cash flow that I have. And I didn't do this in 1 year, 2 years. It's been 5 years, I still have a long way to go. But my goal is to get there. And so the key is that you just got to find what you like, what you're passionate about. I had a friend that wanted to make soap as well, like soap miner, and because he just thought that the soap is very popular. Oh, I should be one to make soap. Look at everyone's buying, love soap miner soap. And I'm like, well, do you love making soap? Have you ever made soap before in your life? And he's like, well, no, I just think this is a good product. And it's like, no, man, you got to find something that you care enough about to make for yourself first, and care enough beyond that to make a little bit extra and start to try and sell that, because then you're going to be passionate about it and people will pick up on it on Noster. If you're telling the story about how you're interacting with the product that you're creating, and or how you're, and once again, it can be providing market access, right? You have access to this guy, this old man who makes buttons, right, in his woodshed in the back, and nobody knows this guy exists and he doesn't use the internet, but you found this guy and he's got these amazing artistic buttons, and now you can start to bring those over to Noster and sell them. Maybe it's a terrible example, but the point
No,
is
it's
is that
not.
there's ways
Yeah.
to find market access to this weird shit that people might want to buy with Bitcoin, and you can once again take your dollars, turn it into this thing, provide market access for somebody on Noster for Bitcoin. And
Well, you
by if more people start doing this, then we just grow the now there's really an economy happening, right? And it doesn't matter if there's a bridge between fiat and the Bitcoin world. The point is that the Bitcoin is circulating, the velocity is increasing, and each time that Bitcoin changes hands, guess what? We're left with more Bitcoin in our cold storage because the price generally goes up. And so each time we circle around buying these goods and services from each other, we spend essentially less Bitcoin on it, And then when we have more Bitcoin in our cold storage, guess what? There's more room for new people to come in and participate in the economy as well.
Yeah, and just like you were talking about with trying to shrink that fiat cash flow versus your Bitcoin cash flow, it's like the same thing with the bridge. Like we're moving the two pieces of land closer together, slowly but surely. That's what we're trying to do. But I want to circle back up with something you said, because I was talking about how it's never been easier to go do something, and the old you can just do things. That's all true, but that is such an important point, that if you don't love what you're doing, yeah, people think, I actually mentioned this in my speech, when I spoke at BTC Prague last year, was everyone wants a fiat job in Bitcoin. Like they just want to take their level of comfort and what they're doing. They're miserable in their cubicle job where they're punching in spreadsheets and hammering a paycheck, and they just think that somehow if they have that same job in Bitcoin, they'll all of a sudden become happy. And you're not, because you're not doing anything. You're not providing value. Your current job isn't providing any value to you. You're just taking a paycheck to keep your lights on, to keep your house from being foreclosed on, to put gas in your car, to keep your grocery cart filled. Like, you're not actually doing of anything of substance that you enjoy, and just changing the dollar sign to a Bitcoin sign is not going to make a difference. And we've had we've had a few people come into Sovereign with, like, that kind of mentality. It's like, oh, I'm in a Bitcoin company, everything's going to be great. And we brought them on as salespeople like that, and it's like, do you actually love sales though? Do you love getting in front of people? Like, do you? And we have a couple guys on the team who love sales, and you know what? They're freaking good, and they kill it, and they're doing a good job. But we have other people that it was just like they just thought, I just need a Bitcoin job and I'll be good. And it's like, no, they get burnt out. They don't know how to sell. They get frustrated, and then they leave. And it's, part of that's on us, and we're learning, we're figuring that out as well. It's like, okay, you know, we've really refined our search to, you need to be passionate about this. You need, like, sales needs to be your passion, not Bitcoin. Like, yes, you need to have a ton of knowledge about Bitcoin. You need to know what you're talking about, but your passion needs to be sales. If your passion is permaculture, or your passion is fixing cars, or your passion is electrical engineering, like, this is not the gig for you. Like, just because you love Bitcoin doesn't mean you're going to be happy here. And I think it's critical to mention that too, because I think a lot of people get caught in the sort of fantasy or this idyllic notion of, I just get into Bitcoin and everything's going to be great. It is hard in Bitcoin, especially now, this early. Like, it is really, really hard. Like, we truly are on the frontier. I mean, we're in the covered wagons. There's Indians on the hill. There's a river we got to cross. We're running out of food. Like, it is hard out here. And especially doing stuff in a bear market that obviously, doubles the difficulty, 10x is the difficulty, or whatever. And it's not just sunshine and rainbows just because you stepped into the world of Bitcoin. Like, it's a lot of work. It's really hard. But to your point, if you're doing something you're passionate about and that's what's driving you, and you just happen to make your unit of account Bitcoin, that's where the success lies. That's how you can really progress and move forward.
Yeah, it's like if you have a hobby and you want to try and monetize that hobby, um, if you're trying to monetize it in the fiat world, I mean, sure, you probably could, um, but there's just like a lot of enthusiasm. Because people were, as a Bitcoiner, I am hungry. I wish there was more stuff that I had access to that I could spend my Bitcoin on directly. And so when that thing pops up, I get excited and I want to support that uh, endeavor. And so it's like you could try and monetize your hobby on Twitter for fiat, and compete with all these other people that are also trying to monetize their hobby over there for fiat. Or you could monetize your hobby for Bitcoin, and there's like like we need more. Like we need. I hope that there's like more people producing maple syrup, and more people producing soap, and more choices, and there should be sheep's milk soap, and the the pork, the lard hand creams, and in addition to the beef tallow, and you know what I mean. Like there should be as many of these options as possible. Um, because there's a lot of room. I think even with the small like Nostr, I think UTXO recently has been doing some analysis of like what the active user base of Nostr is like and everything. And he started off saying, "Oh, it looks like there's about 30,000 daily active users." And then he's like, "Well, as I crunch the numbers more, maybe it's really only more like 4,000." And the amount of economic activity that's happening, if it really is just 4,000 people, is insane to me. Because
Crazy.
that seems like, at least for the lens in which I'm viewing Nostrip through, it just seems like pretty much everything is like, I've got an amazing product, and then other people are like, I bought this amazing product. Look at how it's fucking awesome. And that's pretty much all I see. Just like there's producers producing good shit, and there's people buying it saying this shit was really good. Come
Well,
join
it's
us,
funny. Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because I know UTXO, the webmaster, he's looking at it from like, how do we get more people onto Nostr, and which is all important. Like, we should try to get more people on. The UX should be good. There's things we should be adding. We should be iterating to make more people want to come there. But I agree. I looked at it the same way you did. I saw that same post he put out that if you have five or more followers and you're following five or more people, that daily active user base is only 4,000 people. So in reality, it's probably even less. So, it's probably like 3,000 or 2,500. But I stepped back and I was just like, holy shit, man. There's like 2 to 3,000 people on this ecosystem. And I see there's so much going on Nostr. I'm overwhelmed by it. Like, I have to step off of my, and this isn't even an algorithmically controlled feed. This is my feed. I've curated chronologically by when people post, and I get overwhelmed with how much activity and commerce and ideas and people doing stuff on there. It's so much to me, and I was like, how is such a small subset of people doing this much stuff? That was the exact framing I had when I saw that post as well.
It's impressive. And the point is that if that's what's going on with this small group of people, there's a lot of room. Like the, a lot of people can show up and start to try and, like I said, monetize your hobby. Start making bait axes with your oven. Start building nodes and try and sell nodes. Whatever. It doesn't have to be food. It doesn't have to be something that people eat. It doesn't have to be a candle that you use once. It could be hardware. It could be art. Anything, whatever you love and you just do on the side anyways, do a little bit extra, try and sell it at the Bitcoin meetup, try and sell it on Nostr, try and start tipping the balance of that cash flow, right? A little bit less fiat cash flow, a little bit more Bitcoin cash flow, until all of a sudden one day you're going to say, maybe I can quit my job. you know my stack has increased in purchasing power enough where I got some runway. I've got a burgeoning business. I've got customers. I've got a setup going for how I'm producing this stuff. I could scale it just a little bit. I could invest a little bit, just scale it a little bit, and boom, I see you later, job. Fiat, goodbye. And now I'm living, earning Bitcoin. You know,
Yeah, I mean, worst case scenario, you did something you like to do and people gave you some Bitcoin for it. And like, great, you got some extra walking around Bitcoin. And that's worst case scenario. So you've inspired me. I'm maybe gonna bring some barbecue to the next Chicago Bit Devs meetup. We'll see what I can get on the smoker.
yeah, I'll buy it. That's like something that, as much as I produce my own food, right? That
Yeah.
value added stuff that's tasty and crafted, like, because I know you know how to cook. I've seen your pictures of the lamb and everything, and it's like, yeah, dude, I want to taste that too. So if you give me the opportunity to get it at the Bit Devs meetup, I'm sure gonna take it. Um, oh shoot, I lost my thought there.
Well, yeah, I'll add on to that. But yeah, I mean, there's, well, and again, it's like, uh this is the beauty of the division of labor, right? Like, I get your lamb, I prepare it, and then someone else gets to eat it, and it's like this whole process. You got the inputs from someone else. The output came to me. I changed the output, and now we have a new output, and it's the whole process. It's just really the beauty of Austrian economics and the famous, I think it was a Milton Friedman or whatever, or the How a Pencil Was Made, that old documentary from like, uh, I forget who did that now, but just everything that takes to go into making a stupid little pencil, like, it's the exact same thing. And you can play some part along the way in that process, in that value add process. So it's these are ideas, concepts that are as old as time, and we're just trying to bring them back into reality as opposed to outsourcing everything to some sort of centralized misallocator of capital and resources.
So you're a listener of the Bugle, and the Bugle's got great memes. And one of their greatest memes is the revolution will have bad UX. That's one of my favorites. You know, that in order to deal with all this shit, we're gonna have to like there are hiccups and bumps along the way that we have to sort of work our way through. And recently, actually, what's come up in this Southwest Michigan meetup, and the meetup is well, I don't know when this podcast is being released, but from the time that we're recording, it's tomorrow. It's on Thursday.
Sorry,
And
yeah,
so
it'll be the Monday after your meetup tomorrow. So
so tomorrow we're basically the reason we have so many different people bringing these products, right, for us to buy and exchange with each other, but we don't really have a unified mechanism for pricing. Like I price my stuff, my input costs are in dollars, so I price my stuff in dollars so I can do accounting to see, at, in fiat world, like did I come out ahead or not? And then some people are pricing in sats, um, and so but they're putting the price up like several weeks in advance. So that the actual cost, if you're thinking of your purchasing power in dollars through your Bitcoin stack, is fluctuating leading up to the meetup. Like right now, the price is fairly volatile. It's been more volatile in the past, but it still changes a few percent, which gets you to think about, how much do I want 5 pounds of coffee or 4 pounds, depending on what the price is doing. And then, so basically, what I'm getting at here is like, have you thought about much like what the standard for pricing these things are in Bitcoin? Like, do you think it makes sense to just stick with the most people understand the unit of account of a dollar, and you price it in dollars, and then when during at the time of the exchange, whatever the Bitcoin is at that time, you exchange it.
unfortunately, we're in a period of time where 99% of the world's unit of account is the dollar. And I've come to the conclusion that there's no way around it. Like you can be on a Bitcoin standard. I live my life on a Bitcoin standard, but I'm subject to the volatility of Bitcoin because to go buy stuff, I unfortunately have to um, figure out a way to get dollars from my Bitcoin, whether that's selling, whether that's borrowing against it, or whatever, to go buy things at Whole Foods to pay the guy that fixed my car. I don't know a Bitcoin mechanic, unfortunately. If anyone's a Bitcoin mechanic out there, please reach out. Although if you're anywhere outside the city I'm in, I'm probably gonna have a hard time driving a broken car to you. But you know, I I've sadly reached the conclusion that until we change the unit of account, like it's all kind of a lost cause. And I was talking with not a lost cause. That's not the right phrase. That it's you're not going to be able to price your life in Bitcoin because your costs are not in Bitcoin. And so unfortunately, you have to pay people in Bitcoin. You have to pay things, or excuse me, pay people in dollars. You have to pay things in dollars. And it's what I was having this conversation with Source Node about the adoption of Bitcoin. And I've been trying to flesh this idea out a little more. But you basically have the bottom of the log curve of Bitcoin going into the future. And that's the adoption rate. That's people storing their savings in Bitcoin, not spending Bitcoin. And that's how many people or how many or rather how many dollars are being converted into Bitcoin for long-term savings. Now, obviously, that's more people doing that, but it's also more dollars going in. And that's the bottom of that curve, measured in dollars, measured in gold, whatever you want. And then all of the noise above the bottom of that log curve is just traders, people moving in and out, people trying to get a profit, people trying to People are like, oh, well, I bought a home with my Bitcoin. It's like, well, you just sell your Bitcoin for dollars, and then you got the home. That's an asset rotation. So that's people rotating out of Bitcoin. So everything above the bottom of that log curve is a rotation out of Bitcoin into something else denominated in dollars, which is a huge part also why we have this. The only reason we have volatility, and this isn't some novel idea, the only reason we have volatility is because we're priced in dollars. And so we have this unit of account that as people are moving in and out of it, it's changing the purchasing power of it. So I've kind of just become resigned to the fact that until we actually have Bitcoin as our unit of account, there is no way around the problem of what you're talking about. And it's just going to take that log curve going and going and going. And then I'm a believer we're going to hit the S curve. Like we're going to hit a plateau where we're going to reach a tipping point, and there's going to be whatever the percentage of merchants is. I don't know if it's 20%, I don't know if it's 40%, 70%, whatever the number is. When we start getting to economic activity being coordinated more in Bitcoin, not necessarily, or enough in Bitcoin, rather, more is not the right word, enough in Bitcoin to where the demand for dollars is just gone. And it's like, I need Bitcoin, I need Bitcoin, I need Bitcoin. Whatever that breaking point is, that's like the other part of the S curve. And we hyper Bitcoinize, whatever you want to call it. We're on a Bitcoin standard, we defiatize, whatever you want to call it. But until we get to that up part of the S curve, I just don't. And our unit of account has converted from dollars to Bitcoin. I don't think there's a way to avoid that problem. You have to, because the rest of the world is denominating it in dollars. You have to, because your costs inherently are in dollars. So it's a lot. I know I went on for a long time there, but it's something I've really put a lot of thought and time and effort into trying to understand. And unfortunately, that's kind of the conclusion I have reached.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten some criticism personally for not pricing in sats for denominating in dollars as the unit. Like this thing is $400, this thing is $12, and sometimes it comes up, well, you're trying to live on Bitcoin, right? Why not just price it in sats? And so one of the big issues is that when you price it in stats, there can be some bad vibes, right? Especially if the price is set in place with a pretty decent time in between the transaction taking place. The lamb is a pretty good example of that, right? Whereas, like, if I price my lamb at the beginning of the season, when I start taking, well, once I know that, okay, these are the lambs that I'm going to sell. This is about July. Um, and so I want to get this much money per pound hanging weight on this lamb. And so when you sign up to buy that lamb, I take a deposit, right? And that's based on the Bitcoin price at that time. And then I deliver the lamb several months later, and then I get the final remainder of the payment. If I just said, okay, we're locking in this right now, and I waited until the final sale of it, well, that's a lot of time for the price to move around where I'm trying to make economic calculations on how much I'm going to get for this lamb sale, and the buyer's trying to make economic calculations on how much Bitcoin they're going to need to pay for the lamb, and it's going all over the place the entire time. And finally, when the sale comes to happen, each person's idea of what that was going to be is probably very different from when you initially made that contract, right? Made the deal. And so, I mean, taking the deposit at the beginning is one way of kind of DCAing the deal, right? So it's like, all right, whoever, maybe one person got the better side of the deal at the beginning with the deposit, and then the other person got the other side of the deal because the price moved in their favor by the time they make the final payment, and that kind of smooths it out. But it's very impractical to do that with like a $10 item or whatever. Like in the
Yeah.
example of
Well,
like,
no, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, so like in the example of like a coffee, if someone's leading up to this meetup tomorrow, it's like the fellow put the price of the coffee in sats, and then so you're kind of like locked into buying this much coffee for this much sats, but the dollar value of how much Bitcoin you're going to be spending by when you actually make that transaction 3 weeks later or whatever is going to be either he's going to feel bad because the price moved against him, or I'm going to feel bad because the price moved against me, instead of just like making the transaction for whatever the price was at the time. And we're in a position right now where the price feed of Bitcoin is pretty reliable, right? There hasn't been too much decoupling from the spot price of Bitcoin and the local price of Bitcoin, which I think will happen as this KYC free Bitcoin becomes more and more difficult to get and more desired. You're going to see, instead of the premiums being like 5 to 8% or 4 to 8%, it might be like 15 to 20, and that starts to become like a completely different Bitcoin altogether, right? It's just a totally different pricing mechanism. And so then it becomes really hard to denominate to figure out what the price of your shit is in Bitcoin.
Well, at the end of the day, it's on the producer to ask for whatever currency they want, and unfortunately the production cycle doesn't match the Bitcoin cycle, except for maybe extraordinary circumstances like building an airplane or something like that, where it, you can't take advantage of the Bitcoin cycle within a production cycle. So your input costs are all denominated in one currency, and over time it's always the better decision to um hold. If you can get to a 5-year hold, basically start buying Bitcoin today, even, or just buy a big lump sum today, wait 5 years, and then you're always better off spending your Bitcoin at that point in time. So like, you can't do that in a business production cycle, but save for very, very unique circumstances or products, it just doesn't match up. And so you have this mismatch of purchasing power cycles where over the long term, yes, it's better to be holding Bitcoin and your purchasing power will go up. And then at that point in time, who cares? Your Bitcoin is appreciated so much that it doesn't matter what your initial costs were, because you're in the black, which is like, that's how people live on Bitcoin, right? They bought it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and now they're up so much from their starting point that, whether they 10x or 20x, it's like, I'm still getting this whatever I'm buying at a 15th of what I paid, back then. So like, you just don't have a long enough time horizon in the production of goods to be able to take advantage of Bitcoin in that way. And we're just, unfortunately, the bridges and the things like that, we're just going to need them. We're just going to have to deal with them. They are a reality. There's no People are building tools to help get across that bridge and help utilize it. And it's not perfect. It's not ideal. It's unfortunate, but I just sadly don't really see any way around. I mean, even at the end of the day, you could be the most hardcore Bitcoiner. You could be, living off the grid. You could be doing whatever. You could build your own house. You still paid for that wood in fiat, or you still paid for the brick in fiat. Like, there is no way you got 100% of the construction materials of your home. Like, I mean, we're not, we're talking like severe asceticism at that point. We're talking like monks from the 1600s, like living in a cave type stuff. You're eating honey out of a tree, and brewing your own beer is food, because like you're not making you're not you're just so out of the system. And it's like, that's just not a realistic way for anyone to really go through life. That
Yeah,
maybe
I
that's
mean,
for, yeah.
the compromise that you have to make to pass the like purity test of truly living on a Bitcoin standard is not practical or even
No,
desirable for, I think, for anyone.
no.
And so it's okay, to use the fiat system as a reference point. Once again, like I'm saying, we can soft fork the society. We can have a little Bitcoin meetup, micro circular economy, and connect those little circular economies together with these people muling the goods and the goods between them and everything. And we can still fall back on the protections that the fiat system provides. Like, the police are still there, if there's like something that happens, and the legal system is still there, but we're just trying to like avoid that shit at all costs and try and do something for ourselves first. And like, yeah, it's just one of those things. Everyone understands dollars. That's how you price everything else in your life. And so it makes it, I think, just a lot cleaner, uh, especially when new people start coming to the meetup, how confusing it is. if like you're like, yeah, that's 20K sats, they're like, what the fuck does that mean? You know, you want to try and make these people feel comfortable uh, starting to use their Bitcoin, right? Instead of alienate them like because they're not deep enough in the culture yet.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, I mean, all of us had our turning point, our moment when we had our Saul on the road to Damascus moment where we saw the light, and it's we didn't just wake up the next day running our own node, a multi-sig setup in different jurisdictions and stuff. Like, it took time. It's a process, and we should be empathetic to people along the way while still guiding them in the right way by imparting good advice, by telling them to self custody, to try to get no KYC Bitcoin, to take your privacy seriously, best practices and all that. But it the reality is that's just sadly not the world we live in. We're working towards that. That's what all of us working in this space are trying to do, is trying to manifest that reality, to make that the case where we don't have to deal with all this stuff. But I just don't see a way where we fully move into a Bitcoin stand. I mean, like, that's the final boss. That's unit of account. Like, there, in my opinion, there is Bitcoin has solved the store of value problem. It's solved the medium of exchange problem. It's just not everyone utilizes it for that. But those two are done. Like, those are over. It's if you want to put your savings to Bitcoin and you want to spend Bitcoin, you can do that. That's fully functional, 100% available to anybody right now. But we haven't gotten the unit of account part. We haven't hit that third leg on the bar stool of unit of account yet. And that's the only way a true full Bitcoin standard comes into being, is when that third property of money is satisfied. And we're just frankly not there yet. So
Yeah, there has to be enough participants in like a local economy for the just for the amount of Bitcoin that's circulating in that economy to denominate the amount, the prices, right? And so it's not like there has to be a global price of Bitcoin everywhere for people to use Bitcoin as the unit of account. There just has
right.
to be enough people and enough liquidity locally, without anybody really being able to arbitrage out, right? Um, to create it so that it's stable enough to price your shit in sats. Now, when we're looking at this global price feed, as adoption, as people are, like you said, putting more dollars into Bitcoin, and the price is skyrocket. Sometimes the price can go up 10% in a day and then down 10% in a day. That's unreasonable. There's no way you can ever use that as a unit of account because it's way too volatile in the short term. But if you have enough people, where they're just using Bitcoin every day, all the time, you're fine, right? It doesn't matter because I'm gonna buy something from somebody, give them my Bitcoin, 10,000 sats. Then I'm gonna turn around and sell something, and earn Bitcoin, 10,000 sats back, and the Bitcoin's just circulating around, and really what the amount of it doesn't necessarily matter as long as that pool stays relatively stable, right? The access to the Bitcoin in that local economy stays relatively stable.
Well, and there are some communities, like I know of in Africa, that are doing this, in South Africa, and they have some small insular communities where they do this. But to your point, um, it's everyone's operating on that standard, and great, arbitrage back out into your local currency. Bitcoin crashed 10% today. Well, your local currency is down 50%, every week. So um, there are certain places where it works, and to your point, it's just, it has to be everyone that's participating in that economy, everyone that's participating in that community, that has to be. But the reason it works is because they are making it their unit of account. It is the unit of account for that group of people, and until that specific part of the equation is satisfied, it's just not going to work on a broader scale. It can work in small scales where everyone's operating on that standard. But
Well, like look at Nostr, for example, right? The sats aren't necessarily. I don't When I zap somebody 21 sats, I don't think about whether that's one worth 1 cent or 2 cents. I'm on a Bitcoin unit of account with my zaps, right? A good zap is like, for me, it's like
right,
2,121 sats, right? Like that's a good zap, and I don't really think about whether that's worth $5 or $10 or whatever. I'm because once again the pool of liquidity is kind of uh, isolated there. There's not much arbitrage to and what I know that if I the culture too is like pretty much in alignment, like 21 sat, 42 sat zaps, right? When I produce content and make a good note and I get zapped, people also say, well, I'm not going to. I think you get what I'm trying to say is that this is a pretty
Yep.
good example of Bitcoin becoming a unit of account in like a proof of concept sort of ecosystem, and we can learn a lot from that.
Oh, absolutely. It's fortunately where you have something like that. Well, I'm the same way. I have my app set at 105. Although I will admit, I did adjust it down from. I did join when Bitcoin was like 15K, and I had it at 210, and I've since adjusted it down to 105. But, uh, anyways, uh, that being said, uh, you have something with Nostr where basically, okay, so you have this digital community, right, where it's a communication layer. The input costs are denominated in people that care about Nostr's time and energy, right? Like, so there is no one's paying dollars for, yes, some of the people running infrastructure, and I understand that paid relays. Yes, some people do pay to keep the network going and electric bills and these sorts of things. I get that. But the overall general idea is there aren't really any input costs where people are passing that on and they're saying like, hey, I need to get compensated for something I did. um you know uh, please pay me for it. And so it works because no one had to denominate anything they want to get paid for in anything. It's just time, resources, and most people are running relays and the infrastructure out of a principled stance as opposed to an economic, which is another issue on the platform. How do you monetize this stuff? Blah blah blah. But to your point on Nostr, you just don't have this outside stuff you have to bring in that you have to pay dollars for, then bring it to Nostr and say, okay, now let's because it's value for value, right? It's the unit of accounts, the Bitcoin, that's the value. And then the value you're paying for is content at that point, or someone's thoughts on stuff. So it's ideas, and content is the production good, which didn't take any input costs other than your time. And you as a Bitcoiner are denominating your time in Bitcoin, so it works.
Yeah, the economy is effectively isolated from the fiat system, right? So then now there doesn't need to be this association or looking back to what the dollar value is. And so back to my dream would be to like these Michigan meetups, we get enough economic activity, enough producers to where at least maybe the food, we can arrive at some sort of like, all right, we don't have to necessarily let our prices be so tied to the dollar. We can sort of get comfortable um, sticking to like a sats as the unit of account. But the more isolated you can get these economies to be from the dollar or from fiat systems, the more potential they have to utilize Bitcoin as the unit of account. It's just right now all of that shit is a diaspora. Like the amount of people participating in Bitcoin and earning Bitcoin and really using Bitcoin as money, right? Are there's no It's very hard to find a true concentration of these people in any one region or location. It's everybody split and spread all over the place. So it makes
Oh,
it hard to use it as a unit account.
right. Well, and so then you look at but even you go to places like Madeira or El Zante or wherever, like they still have to get their food from somewhere. They're still, especially on Madeira, they import everything onto that island. They, grow very little there. So they still, their input cost, even though the community is in Bitcoin, they're still taking stuff in from a much wider economy, a much wider pool of labor, a wider pool of production. And as long as those people are using dollars, it's just not going to work. So, all right, we're past an hour and a half here, Rev. I got to go get my son here before too long. So I appreciate you being on. Is there anything you want to get to before we wrap up here?
No, I'll just shill some stuff. I
Please
do have
show.
that podcast that we mentioned with Reed. Local Bitcoiners. We're really trying. A lot of what we discussed today is what we discussed on that podcast. Just ideas around how to bolster circular economies, how to promote Bitcoin meetups, how to get people to use Bitcoin meetups for more than just talking about Bitcoin and having drinks and building social capital. And so go check out Local Bitcoiners. That's on all your podcast 2.0 stuff. And if you want to find me, I'm on Noster, so I'm Rev Hodl on Noster. Um, and yeah, if you're local, you can buy stuff from me. That's pretty much the main place I sell my things. And so if you're in the Michigan area, Michigan Bitcoin culture, or even I make it as far as like Illinois. I actually run the South Bend, Indiana Bitcoin meetup, so you can meet me in South Bend, Chicago meetup, Western Suburbs, BitDevs. We can cross paths and you can get access to some of my stuff.
Also, just so people know, on Nostr it's Rev.Hodl because the search function sucks on Nostr and it's really hard to find people unless you exactly type
Yes.
it in. So
And not to
Rev.Hodl.
be confused with Reverend Hodl, which is another guy that we get mixed up all the time. People are tagging me and tending to tag him and vice versa. So
Who's actually a
I'm
preacher, right? I
Rev.
think like
I think he's just like he works in conferences and like
oh,
does
okay.
the AV stuff. I don't think he's actually. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know much about the guy, but I just know
Okay.
we get mixed up. And so yeah, you're right. Rev dot Hodl,
Yes.
Hodl, whatever. Tomato, tomato, on Noster, however you want to say it. But yeah, thanks, Brandon. It's been a lot of fun. We talked a lot about a lot of stuff that I don't normally get to on podcasts, so it's been pretty cool.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I'm so passionate about the circular economy, buying stuff from people. And if for no other reason, it's just so I can shut people up when they ask me, well, what can you actually buy with your Bitcoin? And then I get to list off like 15 things and be like, okay, move along to your next stupid point about Bitcoin. So, Rev, thank you so much for coming on. As always, I'm Plebe Anon on Noster, and you can find me, Brandon Karpoulos, my doxed self on LinkedIn, or you can go to the Sovereign website, SOVREIGN.io, if you want to check out what we're doing there. If you want to refer anyone over to us, we have a 10% referral program as well, to the extent that you have someone interested in getting some education or help set up with Bitcoin. And there's a lot of another thing here, shameless plug before we go here, something I've been thinking about a lot lately. As we're bringing on a customer who is a Bitcoiner who has been in Bitcoin for a long time, but they just needed some help getting like a more technical setup for their website to accept Bitcoin payments. They want to do it sovereign. They want to be sovereign as they do it. And there's a lot of Bitcoiners that are scared to admit they don't know how to do certain things. Like they think if they admit they don't know how to run a node, or don't know how to set up a cold card, or don't want to watch a BTC sessions video, that they're somehow going to fail some sort of purity test and be laughed out of the room. And um, I would just encourage people that if you do need help with something, reach out to people. Where people are so happy to help. People are excited when people want to take the next steps in their journey. And we were all at a point where we didn't understand everything. We're not all self-taught. Lots of people shepherd us along the way. And that's how a lot of us got to where we are today. Is I didn't do this on my own. I had someone from the Chicago meetup help me set up my node. I had someone help me set up my router. Like all these things that people get scared that they're going to somehow, act like they're dumb or don't know things. Like, please don't. Please be open. Reach out. Get help today. No, in all seriousness, like uh, we're here to help. We have expertise. We have ways to help you out to get better. And guess what? You learn it once. You have someone hold your hand, and now you know how to do it forever. And now you can teach the next person. And that's part of the circular economy too, is teaching skills and in trades, whether they're digital or physical as well. So please reach out. Sovereign, SOVREIGN.io. Shoot us an email. Would love to get in touch. And Rev, thank you so much for your time today, and appreciate you and all you're doing, brother.
Looking forward to the barbecue, man. Bring it to the
Yes.
next Bit Devs.
All right. All right. I'm if not April, I'll bring it to the May one for sure. So that'll happen.
Great.
See you,
Good,
man.
good. Later, man.